Analyzing Bischoff and Thompson's take on AEW All Out. In the world of professional wrestling, opinions can be as polarized as the fan base itself. Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson recently weighed in on AEW All Out, diving into the controversy that surrounded the event. Their reflections on the show, especially the shocking spots featuring a plastic bag on Bryan Danielson, the dangerous chair shot in the Strickland vs. Page match, and the chaotic environment of the Nightingale vs. Statlander street fight, offer a blend of commendation and critique that's worth unpacking. Conrad Thompson deserves credit for highlighting the impressive metrics surrounding the pay-per-view. With over 100,000 buys and a live audience of more than 8,000 at the Now Arena, the numbers reflect a strong showing, especially considering AEW's previous pay-per-view was just 13 days prior. Unlike last year's back-to-back events, this time they spaced things out, allowing for better story development and feuds to build. This shift is commendable, as it's essential for promoting investment in storylines. What stands out in their discussion is their balanced approach, acknowledging both the positives and negatives of the event. Unlike Jim Cornette's often relentless criticism, Bischoff and Thompson provide a more nuanced perspective. Conrad's observation that the violence felt excessive and unfamiliar to many is valid. While he may not realize it, promotions like Combat Zone Wrestling have long pushed the envelope with extreme spots involving needles and even weed whackers. However, for AEW, the second largest promotion in the US, this level of violence starkly contrasts with WWE's more toned-down approach, and that juxtaposition is telling. Bischoff's assertion that AEW is in a creative pit resonates with me. He argues that the company's attempts to dig themselves out only lead them deeper into desperation, labeling some of their content as garbage wrestling. I find this perspective compelling. Without ample time to cultivate feuds, matches often resort to shock value over storytelling. The creative struggles are evident when we consider the many talents, Miro, Ricky Starks, the Lucha Bros, and others, who have expressed dissatisfaction with their creative direction, opting instead for opportunities in WWE and other promotions where storytelling takes precedence. The matches themselves, like Strickland vs. Hangman Page or Statlander vs. Nightingale, feel repetitive, often relying on shock rather than innovation. The culmination of these feuds, such as Hangman vs. Jeff Jarrett, risks prioritizing sensationalism over character development. As exciting as these moments can be, they detract from a long-term vision for popular characters like Hangman. The focus should shift from merely creating memorable spots to nurturing narratives that resonate with fans. In conclusion, while Bischoff and Thompson provide a thoughtful critique of AEW All Out, their insights reflect broader issues within the promotion. The challenge lies not just in delivering high-octane matches, but in fostering compelling storylines that keep fans engaged in the long run. Eric Bischoff made a noteworthy observation when he stated, "It's not the kind of thing that you'll build an audience with. It's not the kind of thing that you'll build a business around." AEW, as he sees it, occupies a niche in the wrestling landscape, a small slice of the market that will always have its dedicated fans. They might capture 100% of that limited audience, but if they want to grow, they need to expand their vision. Bischoff's comments aren't a blanket dismissal of wrestling. Rather, they offer a candid reflection on AEW's identity. The cautionary tone is clear. Every professional wrestling company aspires for a larger piece of the pie. Just look at WrestleMania, where WWE routinely draws over 1 million buys and rakes in upwards past $20 million at arenas. In contrast, AEW's biggest show, Wembley Stadium 2023, earned over $15 million, a solid number, but still a reminder of the uphill battle they face. The violent content of their matches, often lengthy and filled with excessive moves, can alienate potential fans. If they don't adapt, they risk stagnating. As the old adage goes, if you're not growing in business, you're eventually dying. Wrestling thrives on audience engagement, and AEW needs to recognize that they're catering to a limited crowd. Hopefully, they'll heed Bischoff's advice and explore a broader wrestling presentation that could attract new viewers. His honesty is refreshing. He acknowledges AEW's current path while hinting at the potential for a more sustainable future. Conrad Thompson weighs in on the recent uproar surrounding the Bryan Danielson bag spot, deeming the outrage fake. Those who purchase the show are typically aware that wrestlers like Jon Moxley and Darby Allin embrace a heightened level of violence. Moreover, it's crucial to remember that a pay-per-view isn't the same as a television show, where sponsors are a significant concern. AEW has maintained strong relationships with its primary sponsors, which have stood the test of time. He argues that AEW isn't aimed at children, a point underscored by its TV-14 rating and a reputation for intense matches and strong language. I find this argument compelling. If fans are aware of what they're buying into, the outrage seems misplaced. Furthermore, the notion that wrestling should be child-friendly is a bit hypocritical. The violence in AEW pales in comparison to what's found in video games like Mortal Kombat or Grand Theft Auto, which are marketed to younger audiences. Those games feature excessive violence and morally questionable scenarios, making AEW's use of thumbtacks and cinder blocks appear tame by comparison. The argument that AEW is a bad influence on children feels like a convenient scapegoat, a criticism often levied against any medium that challenges societal norms, be it video games, movies, or even shows like South Park. Eric Bischoff points out that if a child decides to mimic what they see, the roots of that behavior extend far beyond the realms of wrestling or video games. His primary concern isn't about children being exposed to inappropriate content, it's about the cheap entertainment value and lack of creativity in the current product. Choking Bryan Danielson with a plastic bag, a move that references a classic Ric Flair match, might only resonate with a select few. Reducing a talent like Danielson to shock value undermines his capabilities. While Conrad argues that violence won't deter advertisements, Bischoff counters that a highlight reel showcasing AEW's brutality would likely alienate the average viewer. The discourse around whether AEW is a bad influence on kids, he asserts, is merely a tactic to provoke negative sentiment toward the company. Reflecting on the early days of AEW, Bischoff recalls their initial vision, a sports-based promotion where wins and losses mattered, giving fans a reason to invest. That direction was ambitious but difficult to maintain without booking themselves into a corner. He sees parallels between AEW's current approach and Vince McMahon's micromanagement during WWE's 2019 era. The alternatives presented in AEW, like syringes and cinder blocks, are hardly appealing. Bischoff succinctly sums it up. AEW has become a dollar store version of WWE. It's definitely true in a lot of ways that they aim for shock value, repetitive matches, matches with no build, sometimes shows with nothing but matches and no build, and they also lack creative risks and storytelling, but sometimes they knock it out of the park, like Adam Page burning down Swerve's house. I agree with this assessment. AEW has fallen into a repetitive pattern, with Tony Khan, much like Vince, becoming overextended in his role. His overwhelming power may lead to overlooking questionable ideas, leaving wrestlers to push for matches that lack a more creative and thoughtful approach. I think the answer is only wrestling just needs to be more experimental in their storytelling, and also the storytelling within matches, and maybe get ideas from movies or other influences to come up with something original. And originality can be in shock value matches, but it can't just be that a wide majority of the time. Eric Bischoff rightly pointed out that the opportunity for growth was abundant when AEW launched in 2019, and that potential is still ripe for the taking. The challenge lies in the leadership. The person steering the ship is navigating based on personal preferences rather than a genuine understanding of the broader audience. Tony Khan has often been likened to a kid with action figures, crafting matches that excite him. This approach has indeed led to successful pay-per-views, especially when compared to WWE's repetitive match patterns and oversaturation of events between WWE and NXT. However, for AEW to truly thrive, it must weave compelling stories that resonate with viewers, expanding its audience beyond its current base. The shift towards hardcore and violent matches often feels like an imitation of promotions like Combat Zone Wrestling. There's a palpable pressure on Khan from talents like Jon Moxley, Kenny Omega, and Adam Page to escalate the violence, creating a dilemma that could either alienate existing fans or inadvertently draw in new ones. The storytelling aspect needs more depth, twists, and character motivations that captivate the audience. For instance, envision a storyline where Ricochet, portraying an arrogant character, is taken in by the Don Callis family, who ultimately reject Will Ospreay. This dynamic could explore themes of familial rejection and personal growth. Similarly, Adam Page's evolution into a bully could lead to compelling narratives of resistance from those he targets, all while pursuing the world title as his ultimate motivation. Moreover, the potential for a power struggle among heel factions, the EVPs, the Don Callis family, the Undisputed Kingdom, and Moxley's faction, could mirror the intricate dynamics of the five families in The Godfather. Such a narrative could provide a rich tapestry of conflict and ambition, with Dustin Rhodes battling younger talents like Sammy Guevara or MJF, showcasing the clash between seasoned grit and youthful privilege. While AEW has excelled in delivering thrilling matches, the repetitive nature of some storylines and the relentless pursuit of legendary bouts diminish their impact. This is evident in the recent decision to have Ospreay and Ricochet face off at the anniversary show instead of waiting for a more significant event like WrestleMania. It's encouraging that they're not repeating the All Out format back-to-back next year, but AEW's frequent special shows dilute their effectiveness. When the focus shifts to shock value matches, the storytelling often suffers, making it imperative to create meaningful narratives that lead into these events. I personally appreciated the hardcore matches at All Out, particularly as they stemmed from a well-crafted feud, like the tension within the Blackpool Combat Club, where jealousy over Bryan Danielson's success simmered. AEW has the foundation for great matches. It simply needs to elevate its storytelling and explore innovative narratives that push the company forward. Ultimately, I often find myself wishing I could contribute to AEW's creative direction. Professional wrestling, at its core, is a morality play, a reflection of real-life issues. When the focus shifts solely to hardcore matches and controversial spots, it risks becoming a mere video game experience, losing the deeper connections that can be forged through storytelling. Rushing into marquee matchups may generate immediate buzz, but it rarely captures the lasting engagement that well-crafted narratives can provide. As for the discussions around violence in wrestling, I agree with Bischoff and Conrad's observations. While some violence may be off-putting, the argument about its impact on children feels overblown and weaponized. After all, the level of violence in wrestling pales in comparison to what's depicted in many popular video games and television shows, which often appeal to a wide range of audiences, including children. In conclusion, for AEW to truly realize its potential, it must balance thrilling action with rich storytelling. By investing in character development and compelling narratives, while being mindful of the frequency and nature of their special events, AEW can cultivate a deeper connection with its audience, ensuring its growth and sustainability in the competitive wrestling landscape.